Okay.
Okay. We keep it on now, or yeah, just,
Everybody needs to push their buttons to recognize.
yeah.
Okay.
Would we turn that off then as soon as it's recognized? Do we keep it on?
Yeah,
Off?
keep that on.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we'll keep that on because I think that records it for the system or something. We got quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, I'll call this workshop to order. We have a presentation starting with the Director of Legislative Services, and we'll go forward from here. Andrew? There you go. Ask people who want to speak. Push that button.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I hope you bear with me. I have a bit of a tail end of a cold, so hopefully my voice lasts the duration of the meeting here. So, the purpose of the presentation is to help facilitate discussion and gather feedback on council's committee structure for the term. With your input and the input of senior staff, the recommended committee structure will come forward at a future committee of the whole meeting after the January 26th council workshop related to council discussion on its strategic priorities. The overall objective is to ensure the most effective committee structure is put in place. Presentation will also cover off best practices the town has adopted related to its committees, highlight trends in volunteerism and community engagement tools, and summarize a recent committee survey and review initiative to give some context to the structure options that the Deputy Clerk will outline. In the previous term of council, a number of best practices were adopted, including an appointment policy. The policy addresses such matters as volunteer eligibility, length of service, recruitment, and appointment procedures for new terms of council and midterm vacancies. The intent of the policy is to help inform a transparent, consistent, and fair process. Council also adopted the Canadian Code of Volunteer Involvement, which sets out principles, actions, and commitments. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Council also adopted the Canadian Code of Volunteer Involvement, which sets out principles, actions, and commitments intended to provide for a healthy relationship between the town and its committee volunteers. Council established a 3-member appointment committee responsible for interviewing and recommending committee volunteers for appointment by council, providing advice on committee matters, and helping to inform a consistent professional committee volunteer experience. The policy and committee are tools which help to support the code's principles, which is a great progress for the town. Some new initiatives underway include hosting a recruitment open house, one of which was held last Wednesday, and on the slide you can see an image from that open house. There was about 40 people that attended that, which was a great turnout. We are developing new orientation and onboarding materials for boards and committees, and the first of which will be with the BIA members that will likely be appointed this evening at council. Securing a recent partnership with the Maytree Foundation, which supports representation of diverse communities on its boards and committees. And we know when we have at least one individual who came to the open house from that organization, which is great. We're also looking at developing a registry of volunteers, essentially expanding on our registry that we use for our event volunteers to include committee volunteers as well. And that's sort of a database that can be used to engage residents in the future, whether it's for committee or for other purposes. And we're looking at developing tools to screen and evaluate candidates for the appointment committee. One of the other major initiatives we're working on is an operating policy for committees. And the idea of that policy is to address a number of standards related to the items you see on the slide. And it's generally there to provide for consistency and enhance their effectiveness. And as you'll see from the results of the committee survey and the review, the members themselves are asking for clarification on a number of those areas. So before council considers its committee structure, it might be helpful to highlight some trends in volunteerism generally. The town currently appoints approximately 100 volunteers to its committees. And from our recent community survey, we know that 40% of Newmarket residents indicated some type of community volunteerism. So it's just quite high, actually, relative to the rest of Ontario. And what's been also helpful for us to understand this is a recent study called Bridging the Gap that was put together through an organization called Volunteer Canada. And that's a national nonprofit that leads research and programs in support of civic engagement. So this Bridging the Gap report highlighted some of the trends in volunteerism, and as you can see on the slide, they're likely to be reflective of Newmarket's committee volunteers. And there are some shifts in the nature of volunteers that's occurring. An aging population who have traditionally been the most involved in volunteering is shrinking. More volunteers are seeking shorter-term opportunities with very more specific, tangible outcomes or goals. Leadership volunteers, which would include committee volunteers, tend to be older, and although some of these trends may not be immediate or entirely affect Newmarket, they probably will have an impact on the means of engagement that the town chooses. So in terms of other trends, new Canadians are seeking and being engaged in volunteer opportunities, and that's our partnership with Maytree Foundation will be very helpful in supporting that. Employer-based volunteerism, for example, United Way volunteer opportunities that the town employees can take advantage of is increasing, and that's in part due to the expansion of corporate citizenship and the convenience and positive exposure on a professional level that type of volunteering affords. Volunteers are seeking opportunities to contribute and participate through technology. This includes virtual meetings, online surveys, or just generally integrating or using technology in their volunteer experience. Volunteerism through this report is seen to have been shifting from a commitment to a specific cause to a relationship that benefits both the interests of the individual and the organization that they're working with. And so to that point, volunteerism, you could say, is seen as both a personal, motivated by personal, as well as organizational interests. And these interests do change through each generation. So this slide shows the motivations of volunteering through the generations. Among youth, volunteers are seeking opportunities to contribute with their friends on issues or programs relevant to them on a short-term basis, probably not surprisingly. The Generation X, or the children of baby boomers, are seeking opportunities to involve their family or things that interest them personally. And they're also looking for things, volunteer opportunities that have a defined goal or outcome. Baby boomers tend to be more motivated by the cause they're supporting and the loyalty to the organization that they're serving. The Volunteer Canada study highlighted some interesting factors affecting reasons why people have not returned to or quit a volunteer experience. And you can see it on the bottom of the 4 points on that slide there. In some ways, they're not unlike an employment retention situation. Factors that essentially a lack of professionalism, lack of organization, and a lack of engagement tend to affect the retention of the volunteer. So the study concludes with suggesting a formula for optimal volunteer engagement. Volunteers should have a defined role, but it should also allow for volunteers to shape their experience. So in the case of committees, this means council should be clear in its goals and expectations, but also allow for volunteers to guide and influence their experience, so being open to their suggestions and providing for perhaps a more flexible venue for them to make discussions or have discussions such as a subcommittee. It might also mean that council consider alternative venues for engagement other than a traditional committee, and I'll review some of those other options in a subsequent slide. And the study also suggests that involving volunteers not be overly bureaucratic. In the case of committee volunteers, the application, interview, and appointment process adopted by the town is reasonable, given the nature of their responsibilities. A committee volunteer's work is inherently formal and procedural in nature. It's subject to the rules similar to council. So it's hard to get away from some of the bureaucratic aspects of being a committee volunteer. But that said, that we have made, the town has made efforts to improve the application process, making it more convenient by being able to apply online, and engaging with volunteers through things like the open house. So we have made some efforts there. And through the committee operating policy, we will also explore how to better engage the ongoing work of committees with the business of the town, as well as how to appropriately recognize volunteers. The last point on the slide, matching skills with needs, is probably helpful for the appointment committee to consider in particular, and that is to match the skills and needs with, but also to allow volunteers different experiences from their professional lives. So the appointment committee may want to be open to the possibility that applicants may be seeking an experience which complements new interests in addition to their professional background. There's some interesting and evolving research around various types of community engagement. With respect to committees, the research suggests that a committee is particularly effective where there is a clear mandate set out by the municipality, and the mandate is clearly understood and integrated within the work of the municipality. It's effective where there's a regular reporting relationship, and the work of the committee is evaluated or reviewed in some manner. The roles of the committee participants are clearly understood, both the volunteer members but also the members of council and staff. The committee requires orientation and in some cases training. Ideally, committees are well-resourced, meaning that there's both the secretariat support from the clerk's office, but also the policy expertise, the subject matter expertise to help the committee, guide the committee. And as well, it's important to recognize the work of the committees. And as I mentioned, we're looking at how the town could better recognize its committee members. So committees have a number of positive benefits. Obviously, they can act as an expert sounding board for specific issues. They can act as a quasi-judicial body for property standards and minor variances, for example. They provide input from specific communities and interests on matters like accessibility and inclusion and diversity. But they also organize special events and promote issues of interest to Newmarket. At the same time, the committee structure as a forum for engagement can be limiting, in particular where the criteria supporting effective engagement or effective committees is not entirely present to allow for their success. So, as you may recall, there was a local student that approached the town who had an interest in bringing a youth perspective and integrating that into the decision-making of the town. So rather than striking an ongoing committee, a one-day youth forum was held, and that allowed for a shorter-term participation by a wider cross-section of student leaders. So that was seen as a particularly effective form of engagement rather than an ongoing committee. And on that particular event, as it was brought up at the recent committee of the whole meeting, I believe, there is an information report that will look at the next steps around that. So this next slide outlines the range of tactics that can be used to engage residents. Short-term task forces, focus groups, and forums, high-profile expert or so-called blue ribbon panels, public information centers, surveys, online tools, and events. Committees continue to have their place and relevance, obviously, but on some issues and for particular purposes, Council may wish to explore alternative engagement tactics, particularly where there's an interest in capturing a larger number of participants for specific purposes over a shorter period of time. And that's well supported by some of the trends in volunteerism as well that I outlined earlier. Alternative forms for engagement may also serve to support the recent community survey that indicated that the municipality should improve its efforts to inform residents about municipal processes. On some issues of broad interest to the municipality, an alternative to a committee may be more appropriate, such as a focus group or a survey, where a specific time-bound or project outcome is required and guidance or special expertise is required. A task force or a panel might be better suited than a committee. So we will also see the evolution of the online tools for engagement purposes as well. Some municipalities, and a good example is the City of Calgary, have been looking at online tools that help residents to select and receive notices of opportunities to provide their input, to volunteer, to complete surveys related to issues and services of their interest. And that approach is more specific, timely, and convenient in some ways. The same tools have the potential for virtual two-way dialogue, a format that's yet to be addressed in our legislation with respect to committees. But it might be something that presents an opportunity in the future for something that's a virtual focus group. So there's a few examples in Ontario where that has happened. But of course, these tactics can be used in combination with each other. For example, using events as an opportunity to survey and educate residents. So this slide just shows visually the different ranges of engagement that the town has used in addition to or separate from a committee. The Recreation Playbook, the National Access Awareness Month, New Market, E-Waste Day. There's lots of happy or not button. So there's lots of different other alternatives to a committee. And in the middle there, you'll see a logo. That's the town's new logo for engagement. And that's there to just sort of help emphasize the message that the town wants to hear from and involve its residents and businesses. So you'll probably see that image more often. So the next couple of slides, I'll just briefly summarize the committee survey and review process and key themes. In the late summer and fall, with the support of our AMCTO intern, Ted Horton, Legislative Services distributed an online survey to all committee members, as well as a hard copy for those without email access. The questions in the survey related to their opinion and satisfaction with the nature of their participation, the effectiveness of their mandate and manner in which the committee operates, as well as thoughts on alternative forms of engagement. So the deputy clerk and the intern also undertook interviews with committee chairs and offered the same to members of council and staff involved in supporting or guiding committees. I should just mention maybe on that slide that we had about 30 respondents, which is approximately 30%. I mentioned earlier there's about 100 committee volunteers, so that's a fair outcome. So a copy of the survey results and summary has been included in your agenda materials, which include both the aggregate results for rated questions and committee-specific open-ended comments. So this slide outlines some of the common or reoccurring themes in the survey and in the review. From a participation point of view, there were some committees that had difficulty achieving quorum and individuals fulfilling their term, the full length of their term, as well as the ability to access meetings due to their disability or for another reason, and also had some issue with the conduct of the meetings. There was a theme of a need to ensure adequate fit and training of members with the mandate of the committee. There was a desire for clearer mandates, roles, responsibilities, and operational matters, as well as improved communication or involvement with town business. In some committees, in particular the Environmental Advisory Committee and the Heritage Committee, there was a desire expressed by some members to enhance the nature and the level of staff support provided to some degree or another. Alternative forms of engagement other than a committee appeared to be more palatable or appropriate for advisory type committees rather than statutory committees, which is a reasonable comment. And finally, the survey and review identified a number of related or other issues which should be addressed separately from the discussion around the committee structure itself. So it might have been a particular issue that the committee is dealing with, or some other matter that's not specific to the committee structure. And so we've identified those. So Lisa's going to speak to the committee options report in your agenda.
Good morning. So please refer to your committee structure option chart, which I believe it starts at page 15 of your paper agenda. The chart captures the current listing of the statutory committees and boards, and also the advisory committees and task force. However, it does not list the task force that are comprised of staff only, nor does it list all of the public committees which may have a council representative appointed to it. So we will not be reviewing each committee listed in the chart, but instead we'll spend some time reviewing those that have more substantive options around them. And I'm going to go through what the general options mainly are, that being to maintain the current committee structure. And where I say maintain, what will go along with that is a review of the terms of reference, making sure that the terms of reference have been brought up to current levels, that they are still relevant. And also in conjunction with that, we are hoping that Council will adopt the operating policy that should deal with a lot of the housekeeping matters and some of the key issues that have come up with regards to budget and staff support and that type of thing. Another option will be for some of the committees that we're going to recommend that they be referred to the strategic priority discussions to make sure that these committees are still in line with Council's strategic priorities and that they support what you want to do moving forward, because that is very key in the committees being successful. Also, some of the committees we might recommend a restructuring, which could involve combining two different committees into one. They might have similar mandates. We have looked at that in the review. And also, the last option would be dissolving the current form of the committee and possibly looking at reinstituting a different format of engagement for that particular topic or issue that Council might be wanting to move forward with. So the statutory boards and committees, they are required by provincial legislation or by our own bylaw. And with those, we can't, I'm not going to be recommending that we dissolve any of those because they are required to be kept by law. But with those, we do have the authority to go in and review the terms of reference and make sure that they are operating the way they should, improve on some of those comments where we had feedback that there might be issues with how they report to Council or the staff support, and then also look at implementing the operating policy with those statutory committees also. We will be maintaining them, and the recruitment has been underway since mid-November, I believe. And we did have the open house last week, and we did have almost 40 people come out to that. And there was some very good applicants. They did stop and make application on the way out, many of them. And they seemed very keen and interested in participating. So we are looking forward to moving forward with that recruitment with the appointment committee. The applications do finish as of January 23rd. So again, if you want to continue getting that message out, that would be great. Now, there are two statutory committees that did have a budget request related to them, so I did want to pull those out and just highlight those. Most of the committees under the chart, we do talk about some of the key issues and some of the staff feedback. Most of those can be dealt with through the operating policy. However, the Accessibility Advisory Committee did make a request for an additional budget amount to be allocated to them. That did come through their minutes last year, and it was sent through to the committee review. So I did want to highlight that for you. They are looking for an additional $1,500, and that is to expand their National Access Awareness Week event. The funds would help them with promotion and, again, expanding the event, which has been quite positive for the last few years. Also, under the Heritage Newmarket Committee, there was a request for additional staff resourcing. So we've termed it as a heritage planning resource, but that is something that has come forward from the feedback that we received from the committee members. And it is something that council may want to consider moving forward, whether there is a requirement there to support that area, that business area. So next I'm going to move on to the advisory committees. So they have been established to provide advice to council on specific issues. And really those committee activities should align with council's strategic priorities. And I think the question that we need to ask with these advisory committees moving forward is the traditional committee structure the best way to engage the residents in offering input and advice to council? When we look at some of the feedback that we got, which is captured in the chart, sometimes there's a disconnect with the communication between staff, council, and the committees, and a clear role or a clear idea that the committees have, that they know what they should be working on and what their mandate is. So we really need to identify what we want them working towards. Does it align with your priorities? And then are they being resourced? And what is the best way to collect that information and method of engagement from them? So the committees that I did want to highlight through the advisory group, we'll start out with the Inclusivity Advisory Committee. They did have some key issues that were identified through the survey or through the interviews with the chairs, and that included quorum. They did actually have a motion at the beginning of 2014 to discontinue meeting. They were having quorum issues with the second half of the term, and were not able to have meetings most of the time. People were coming to the meetings, and we weren't having quorum. So that was a big issue for that group. They did indicate that the length of term could have been a contributing factor to that, and that was a common theme through most of the committees. The 4-year term is a long commitment for a lot of volunteers, and we did hear from them that their lives can change in 4 years, and for them, that length of a commitment could be an issue. So with the operating policy, we would be looking at possibly whether we would look for a reconfirmation at a 2-year period and see whether that would be more convenient for committee members to commit for 2 years and then decide whether they can stay on for another 2 or maybe possibly go out for recruitment again. Also, one of the issues that came up with this group is that they didn't have a budget. So it was difficult for them. They wanted to hold events and do outreach into the community, and there wasn't an allocated a budget for that group. And also they felt that their mandate had a lack of clarity or purpose. So I believe they were looking at their mandate, and I do believe Councillor Vey has had some meetings with some of the members of this committee, and they are looking at bringing forward a recommendation to council as to how that could possibly be amended or changed that would be better moving forward. Now, some of the considerations with this group is that they may benefit from a broader network and work with institutions such as the region or social services. Also, it would be good to look at having a independent community group that could possibly drive some of this out on their own, and then provide us with input in other formats, whether we have a yearly forum on inclusivity and diversity. That would be another option. So for this particular group, we are recommending that it does get referred to the strategic priority discussions to see how it fits in with council's priorities moving forward, and whether there are, an alternate methods for engaging this type of topic, and how council would like to collect information on these topics. You could maintain it with the existing structure and review the terms of reference. which I think we would like to probably do that in conjunction with the community group that is meeting with Councillor Bay and the mayor, and engage that moving forward. The other group that we did have a lot of feedback on, and we have presented some options, is the Newmarket Environmental Advisory Committee. So one of the key issues that came through that particular group is they did actually make some recommendations to council throughout the year on some of the priorities they felt they should be working on, and some of the things the town should be doing with regards to sustainability and the environmental areas. I think past councillors will recall we did have a workshop with the group. I believe that was the fall of 2013, and some of these issues were discussed. They have recommended that the town consider a dedicated sustainability officer or coordinator, or having a dedicated environmental staff person. They also sometimes suffered with quorum issues for having their meetings, and also we did get feedback from them that it could be attributed to the length of term. Again, that 4-year commitment is a reoccurring theme. They also wanted to have a more focused work plan. This was another group that felt that their mandate was somewhat open-ended, and there was some difficulty identifying what they should be working on throughout their term, or what they felt they should be working on, maybe what council felt they should be working on, and what staff felt they should be working on. So there was a bit of a disconnect between the three. Also, some of the feedback they provided us was that they needed improved communication, and that somehow decisions were being made in departmental silos. So I think they felt that some departments were working on environmental initiatives and weren't, using them as the soundboard, and they would hear about it after the fact. They would read about a policy passing in the paper, and they felt that maybe they should have been able to contribute to that discussion. Also, volunteer recognition in that area was noted as something they felt that maybe they were undervalued. So considerations for this is we really felt that a work plan had to align with council's strategic priorities, and that the appropriate resources have to be considered to support those initiatives. So there's a lot of really good recommendations that have come out from the committee, and if council does want to move forward with those, they do have to think about what the resourcing will be behind those recommendations. Also, staff, there is a lot of expertise in these areas that currently is available through the staff. They have the technical skills. So I'm not sure moving forward. I think environmental advisory committees were set up at one point in time to get some of that expertise, because maybe it wasn't on the staff side. But certainly in the organization now, there's a lot of staff expertise there. So that is something to think about moving forward. Also, again, just reaffirming that the roles and responsibilities of the members really have to be clearly indicated in the mandate for this particular group, because if it's not, you will get the requests for what they feel they want to work on and move towards if it hasn't been indicated to them what they should be working on. So with this group, we also are recommending that it be referred to the strategic priority discussions. Also, you can maintain the existing structure, again, with the view of updating the terms of reference and instituting the operating policy. Council could consider approving a dedicated sustainability coordinator position. That's something you can also think about. Or with this group, you can also dissolve it and look at alternate forms of engagement where you might be able to get that information from members of the public, or have shorter term commitments on focused areas. That is something else that you can consider. So the Newmarket Downtown Development Subcommittee, that was one that, I guess I should first start off by saying that the Economic Development Advisory Committee, we haven't put forth any options on that group, because there is an independent review that's being led by the Commissioner of Community Services on what that group would look like moving forward. However, I did have discussions with Chris Callio on the NNDS, I guess is what it's called. And yes, And what we did talk about was that there was a bit of a disconnect between the subcommittee and NEDAC, that they were making recommendations, but not necessarily, NEDAC wasn't really, I wouldn't say not interested, but they were a separate group working independently in some cases. So what the recommendations there is that the subcommittee be actually reconstituted as an actual committee, independent committee on its own, reviewing the applications. And then align that with our appointment policy, because I believe that is one group that has an independent appointment process. So we would like to see that one brought in line also with the appointment policy. The other committee that we have some opportunities for some changes with is the street naming committee. They, staff did bring up that there were some quorum issues with that group, and also their agendas and minutes were not on the website, so that was something that we should look at moving forward. Considerations for that is that most of the Greenfield development is completed, and therefore there are not many more new streets that are being created. Staff felt that that the process for the street naming currently is quite complex, and it takes quite a bit to add a name to the reserve list, and sometimes the process is very difficult to explain. Staff did say that council could decide to maintain that existing committee, or they could dissolve the committee and staff could make recommendations directly to council. I think originally that committee was formed to help formulate the street naming policy, and that policy is established now. So I think what staff is leaning towards is having that either where staff reports directly to council on it, or that council delegate authority to staff under that policy. So the other group that we looked at were the task forces, and generally where we've recommended maintaining those are for the task forces that still have ongoing projects that they're working on that haven't yet been completed. The one task force that there's opportunities for restructuring, that would be the Community Center Lands Task Force, and what we would look at bringing that one together with is the Downtown Newmarket Parking Review Task Force. They have similar mandates and working towards similar goals, so that would be one opportunity where two task forces could be combined into one. Other than that, it is just a very high level overview of the chart. Really what we're looking for is your feedback on any specific areas that you might have interest in or are aware of. Also, throughout your election period, you may have heard from residents of other areas where you might have interests where committees need to be formed or alternate methods of engagement. So this was really just to bring the information together for you and let you know what we've heard from our survey and from our interviews, let you see the background on volunteerism trends and what some of the options can be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Mayor, just to finalize next steps, we're looking for feedback here, and apart from this meeting, we'll have some insight likely from the council workshop on its strategic priorities, and we'll have a report that will recommend a structure coming at a future committee of the whole meeting, likely after that date. And of course, then the recruitment and the appointment process follows from there.
Okay, thank you. Before we go further, though, I do need to say that in accordance with the town's procedure bylaw, no decisions are to be made, but rather that this meeting is an opportunity for council to have an informal discussion regarding the matters that were presented for us. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, there being none, then I'll go to the queue. Councillor Vague.
Thank you very much. First, thank you very much for the overview. It's very informative. I can tell a lot of work's gone into it, and your presentation was great, just coming into the highlights for us. Just two comments. One of the things we all heard about during the campaign, that was even reported in the Era Banner, was traffic safety and traffic mitigation. I know we're going to be getting a report on that, and I think that's coming sooner than later on on basically some recommendations and a bit of information. Do you have an approximate time for that? I just don't want to get into it today because I think from that report we will be going into a traffic safety committee. But do you have any idea what the timeline for that will be?
Andrew?
Anyone?
Or, yep, perhaps, yep, Peter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the timing is somewhere in the middle of the year for that report back to.
So June, sometime before
Yeah.
our summer break.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The second thing I just wanted to comment on, at the beginning of your presentation, you referred a number of times to a study, and you referred to it as the Volunteer Canada study. And because we are working with volunteers, any training that we can receive on working with volunteers, making it a better experience for them, helping to meet their expectations. I found it very interesting, the highlights you provided. But would we, I don't know if other members of council, but I'd certainly like a copy of that report. If you could just drop it in my mailbox. And I don't know if other members do, but certainly it can be beneficial to all of us.
It'd be good for all members of council to have the benefit of
Yeah,
that.
that's
That's good.
that's
Thank
what
you.
I said. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Those were my
Thank you.
comments.
Councillor Twinney.
Oh, okay. What about, okay, I guess it's talking about specific additional committees perhaps that are on here. That was something that we would refer to our, I guess, our strategic priorities, so that would be the time to discuss anything that I think or that I'd like to bring up as something as an idea for any committees for this coming term. That would be the appropriate place. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess? Okay.
That would be appropriate. Maybe if you could share an idea with us.
Well, we talked about this last term. I know Regional Councillor John Taylor talked about it quite a bit, and as a Trails and Parks Committee, it's something that we get a lot. I mean, one of the top conversation, I guess, and interaction with our residents is often to do around our trails. Where they should be, what can improve them. As well as parks. When we talk about, I know the recreation playbook, we'll maybe tie that part of it in. But again, it's something that, when we're talking to residents, I find that that's an area of the town that has a lot of interest and concerns or ideas. And I think it might be something that it would be a good opportunity to engage residents. And what it is maybe. And when we talk about trails, there used to be a trails committee, and that was, I guess, like last term, it never continued on. But maybe it's a new type of committee and it involves parks as well, because parks and trails kind of go in together. So just a thought that I'd like to, obviously I'm going to be bringing it up during our strategic priority session.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks. I have a fair bit of feedback, so I hope you can bear with me. I'll start by saying I actually hope that we can get a lot of work done today. I would prefer not to see us spend much, if any, time at strategic priorities on this. I think this is important, but we're dealing with it here, and I'm hoping staff can take a lot of this feedback and give us some recommendations and move us forward, because I just think strategic priority session is not that lengthy, and the kinds of things we are grappling with 10 town that are. That's just my 2 cents. I hope we don't spend an hour or two on more on committees and in what we can move around. Strategic priorities for me is bigger than that, and I hope we can spend more time there and get as much done today as we possibly can. Having said that, I'd like to see us really embrace change this term when it comes to committee structure. I think we have the opportunity to do that right now. I think we can move a lot of committees to quarterly. I think, for example, it's very hard to eliminate an environmental advisory committee in a town. It's not a great signal to send, but I think it's something you could go to quarterly. And so I go back to your points that you started with. I think they're really important. Is a clear mandate. And a clear mandate. One of the reasons I believe that works is because then the committees think this is what they really want our advice. They're asking for it on specific items. They're not just saying go and muck around out there for a while and we'll see what comes to us. I think if you really say, what we'd really like help with from the Environmental Advisory Committee is the energy plan and the this and the that, and set out 3 or 4 key things. I think the last part to that then is being recognized or feeling heard. And I think if we can move to quarterly on 3 or 4 different committees, advisory committees, and then the 4th one is a joint council meeting where they're with council presenting their findings on key issues. I think it can make us a lot more efficient, streamlined, and I think they would feel much more connected with a clear mandate of this is what council's asked you to look at for them and give them really good advice about. And then this is, your chance to sit down directly with them and provide that feedback. So which ones we could do that on, I can't necessarily say. I like the idea, and I'll try to move quickly, I like the idea of combining property standards and committee of adjustment. Anywhere we can combine committees or streamline committees or membership, I think is good. If the only synergy there, though, is that they're the same people, then I wouldn't do it, because there's lots of people in town that want to get engaged in things. But if there's other synergies in terms of time efficiency, holding meetings one after another, I don't know, then I think it's worth exploring. The Elman Campbell Museum, I'm open to some of those downtown and heritage and historical ones being combined. I'm not sure how easy it is. I don't sit on many of those, so I'll have to defer to others if it can be done. But it's also kind of a standalone kind of group that does but they've got a clear mandate. It's running a program and facility, so I think that keeps them busy and focused, and I think, so maybe that makes sense to let it carry on to a degree, but audit obviously stays the same. Inclusivity Advisory Committee, I'd really like to see that go into an independent community group. I think it's struggled, and I think it's because I think the community needs to own this and sort of think about what it is, and again, they want to see and have happen, and maybe that's one that could go to quarterly, or if it stays within our current structure, or it goes out to a community group, or finally, I think the other option I heard talked about, and I didn't hear as much today, but I heard a little bit about, is that one where we could have a substantive sort of PIC or roundtable discussion, sort of bring in all kinds of people, 50, 60, 80 people, and workshop. And I would actually suggest, as much as I like the trails and parks and trails, because I think parks and trails is a huge priority for the residents of Newmarket, but that's also one that could possibly go that way as a very significant structured engagement once a year. I spoke to the Environmental Advisory Committee. The Economic Development Advisory Committee is, I think, going through a lot of work to try to move towards something more quarterly and more directed, so I think that's underway. The Downtown Development Subcommittee should absolutely be independent. I mean, the minutes come to NEDAC, but nobody, frankly, really looks at them in any meaningful way, let's say that. Street naming, I think, what about, I like the idea of delegating to staff, but could we not have, twice a year a street naming PIC meeting and just take a list and say, this is our list. Twice a term, it opens up to a PIC. Community groups, the public, anybody can come and input, talk about, ask for additions, make suggestions, and then it closes again. And they simply come off the list in a prioritized order. I don't even, in that way, even delegating to staff, for some reason this one's always controversial, and so you get maybe comments like, and they still seem to be in-house, but if it's a transparent list, twice a year you can make recommendations, suggestions, and just take names off the list, I think is in order. Occasionally we have a reason for a site-specific name, but it's not that common. So I wonder if we couldn't even make it more systematic, transparent, and delegated. And the other thing I would say there is not totally the committee structure, but is there a possibility of, given the fact that we have less and less opportunities and we do have need to recognize people and we do have an existing list, can we look at I don't know enough to know, but if the sort of the ratio of street naming between us and developers, is that up for discussion or negotiation so that we can maybe get a little more opportunity in a town with less and less opportunity? I'll defer this one to Councillor Kerwin, but the Bogart Creek Restoration Committee to me has always seemed like a committee unto itself, like it's independent, it does its own thing. I don't know that it's really a committee of council. I mean, it reports through Dave to us, and but when you're finished. Yeah, but again, my bent, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I just like to see us combine committees and have less committees and get more structured and engaged and directed, and where they can exist outside. And I'd say that for the Newmarket Sports Hall of Fame, I don't see that as needing to be a town committee at all. I'd love to just sort of send that off. If they want to request, like a lot of committees in town do, that a member of council participate, but it's still an independent committee. The Community Center Lands Task Force, I just thought I'd mention, I'm pretty sure that I sat on that committee, and so it's got mayor, you've delineated out other ones, but I think that doesn't have regional councillor on there, and I think I had for a long, long time. I think that's going to be a move very quickly and important group again in a month or two, I hope. The parking task force. If we dissolve the task force, I'm hesitant, and I'll admit for political reasons, or you can call it for community optics or whatever, but I think we need a very structured idea or plan on what we would do instead to make sure that people realize we still see that as a priority, we still need input, we're still moving it forward. And I guess the question is, could it be folded into the Community Center Lands Task Force as a way of not having it seem to be going away, but being more efficient? I think there's a suggestion here about potentially dissolving the Public Library Joint Task Force. I think it serves a good purpose, but I've always had a bit of a trouble with a committee that's almost identical to a statutory committee, and so if that's reasonable. A Nikita committee, again, I would see that as being external to the town with a council member delegated to support it if it continues on. And then, yeah, I suspect if we're not hearing about them here, because I don't see we are, as Jane said, I hope we don't, but is newer committees, and hopefully there's not many, but I mean, I believe there's the energy plan committee is forming, and so when we'll hear about those. That's my feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Broom-Plumley.
Thank you. Speaking to volunteerism, I can say that often a volunteer will no longer engage themselves due to lack of organization or having a purpose. I attended the event the other night that you hosted. Not only was it very well attended, it was also very organized. The residents that I spoke to left very informed and very engaged. And the theme that I heard from the people as they were leaving is that they want to feel connected and they want to see results, and they're looking for recognition as well. I also understand, based on other municipalities, ours was extremely well attended, so congratulations. In the absence of Joe Sponga, I just wanted to support him in terms of a youth committee. I think you're underestimating the positivity and the information that you could receive from a youth committee, so you might want to reconsider that. And also the parks and trails, maybe that could be something that you could combine with environmental. I'm noticing in the last 2 months that I've been here, the amount of staff that have skills in the environmental area is pretty amazing, and I'd like to see that utilized. And also, I was hoping that traffic might have come up a little sooner than June, and a committee in that area I believe would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Twinney.
Oh, no, I think that was on from before.
Oh, okay. Councillor Kerwin.
Just 2 items to reply to Regional Councillor Taylor. With the Bogart Creek Restoration Committee, and I've spoken to either Peter Neuhammer or Anita Moore on this, as it says, we will be winding down at the end of the year, but 10 years ago we were formed by resolution of council. So somehow, how do we go about dissolving that committee? By a resolution of council? So at the end of 2015 then, in advance of this, I would suggest that we have a resolution of council to dissolve that committee. We are going to function this year, 2015, by working with the Stewardship Youth Rangers once again, as we've done for the past 10 years. And we've basically then completed our mandate. And over those, it will be 11 years at the end of this time, we've planted well over 10,000 trees and stocked our ponds with fish. And we're going to try to do that again with the Bogart Creek through the Bassmasters. But John is quite correct. We've exceeded our mandate, and we're finished, and we're winding down this year. And also, an organization called Neighborhood Network came into being 7 years ago, and they are planting trees. So basically, the tree planting projects within Newmarket through 2 organizations, Neighborhood Network, and what a cooperation we've had, they'll be finished. It's just like the Halton Recycling Committee that was on. Once we achieved our mandate, it ended. And actually, we ended up with $50,000 from NTERA because of the work that we did, which was terrific. It became art in the park. So you're quite right. So Anita, at the end of the year, if you have a resolution prepared, that we will dissolve that. And just like you say, our members, some have sat there for 10 years. That's a long, long time. And over the years, some have passed away, some have moved out, and it's exhausted. So one more year, and then we're over the hump. And we are a more active committee. We're the type of people who go out and clean the rivers, clean the ponds, plant the trees, stock the rivers, put up bird nests, this type of thing. So we will be finished. So thank you, John, and it's been a great committee.
Thank you. Councillor Bassans?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you very much for the report, and I particularly found the responses to the survey interesting and delighted that you had a 30% response rate. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but certainly in marketing, if you have a 10% response rate, you're generally dancing on the roof. So 30% is very good, and I think it just demonstrates that people do care and want to be able to be seen to be making a difference and participating. So I think this discussion is really important around community engagement. But it's also important because whatever we decide, whatever committee structure we have or committees and groups we have, it does have significant resource implications, whether it's financial, staff, council time, and even the citizens who participate, the residents who participate on these committees. So I think, we do have to weigh very carefully the value along with the opportunity that just having committees allows for community engagement. So to that end, I think that this is an important strategic discussion, and while I don't necessarily believe that the strategic planning session should be where we get into the nits and grits of this committee or that committee or so forth, but I think that what we determine on a priority directional basis at that strategic planning meeting will help to better inform then what committees are then well aligned with those priorities going forward. So I do feel that should be sort of a subsequent outcome of strategic planning. One of the things that did strike me in the comments that we received in the survey, though, is that people do want to feel not only that they have an opportunity to participate, but that their input is being listened to, has some value, and can then turn into some kind of foreseen action. And so I think that the recommendation about having some kind of, whether it's semi-annual or whatever the appropriate time frame is, to have the committees actually sit with council and go through some of the recommendations would be very important. I've been on the other side where I've come here and I've heard delegations from committees. It's such a short snippet, and I really feel that if we could work out some kind of other forum where there is a meaningful dialogue and exchange and to and fro, that would be more beneficial to me as a councillor in receiving information and input, but I think would also be of value to the committee participants. So, I think this is something that is important. It's important to demonstrating that we value community participation, engagement, input, but it's also important from a democratic, open, transparent process. So, thank you.
Thank you. I've had an opportunity to look at the listings as well, and the NDDS subcommittee. I think that initially started because it was an economic development initiative that subsequently became a much broader the Economic Development Advisory Committee. And given the narrow scope that the NDDS has, I think that makes sense to let it stand on its own, because its scope is focused on the Main Street and the administration of the Community Improvement Plan. The other thing with respect to the street naming committees is we may have more people on the list than we have streets left to be named. So I think there's a lot of merit now that the policy has been established to perhaps delegate that. And a quick update maybe on the policy review is something that I would like to see. And then once that's established, I think we just set staff free to make decisions within the policy guidelines. I think that's a good idea as well. Community center lands, and again, depending on how we want to approach the community center lands as to whether or not that becomes a project, and maybe this is the portion that we would consider at the strategic planning session, is how will we deal with that? Should that be a council committee, or should this be something that we turn over and look at developers and people who have the expertise in looking at land and getting highest and best use out of that? So that's another committee that may or may not be some consideration as to whether how effectiveness that might be, but that will depend on the way we approach that project. And again, I agree also with the library task force. I'm not sure that we got the level of engagement or the degree of efficiencies that we were seeking from that. I think that there's more opportunities, but I'm not sure if a task force is the best way to do that. So there may be some thought about how we might, again, give some consideration to look at efficiencies, given that there's a number of things that continue to overlap, and how we might approach that. And that might be a discussion with the library board on a go-forward basis. But all in, I think the work that you've done is quite extensive and has been very fulsome and very helpful in terms of how we approach it. And the engagement of youth through a youth forum, I thought was very effective. And as to whether or not we need a committee or we need a format for any specific group to be heard, I think that's something that would be welcomed, especially for some groups like that. The concern also around having too many meetings too often, then it seems like the committee is chasing themselves to find out what the agenda should be, as opposed to getting the level of discussion and engagement that they want to have. So I like the idea of quarterly meetings. I like the idea, just notionally, that maybe each committee should have 2 of their own quarterly meetings and then come and make a presentation to council saying these are the issues, these are the recommendations, and then almost like a semi-annual meeting or a discussion with council as, are we on track? Does that fit with what council wants to accomplish? And if so, we'll have another couple of meetings and we'll come back and talk about progress. So progress reports on some of those issues, and maybe more than a 5-minute deputation. That might be something that could work. And with the number of committees that we have, we might be able to get a good schedule together to hear and to be heard at the same time. So this has been a very good exercise, and I think that a lot of good things can come out of that. But those are some of the things I'd like staff to consider as we go forward. Mr. Shelton?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to wait till all the council members have spoken,
Okay.
if they have.
Everyone's had a chance to speak once. I still have Regional Councillor and Councillor 20 in the queue, so we'll do that then, and we'll go from there. Regional Councillor?
Yeah, one question I forgot to ask, and it just the mayor touched on it, but the NDDS, remind me, that essentially is the body that deals with the grants and loans, correct?
Yes.
Is there any reason that could not be administered by staff? Is there there's no statutory reason, right? It's our own program, or?
Mr. Sheldon?
Just on that program, the recommendations that come from that committee have to be approved by the CAO. That is the way it's set up currently. But we could provide some feedback on whether there is an alternate in terms of the discussion and advice and recommendations that we get from the committee.
Yeah, I guess my question, I'd have a couple of reasons. I believe sometimes the loans can be fairly substantial. Am I right? Like they can be hundreds of thousands?
The loans, the maximum loan is $100,000, and it has to be matching, so it would have to be based on at least a $200,000 capital project on the building or whatever, and so the loan would be up to 50% of that amount.
Okay, and so I guess what I would say is that 2 things. One is that I think there can be and I'm not saying it's justified, but there can be a perception that with a relatively small downtown administering these, there's often people on it applying and then stepping out, and or they're next door, or they own a building, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it'd be nice to try to find a way that avoids that optic, and I think a staff analysis and a staff recommendation. The other thing I'd say is I think that a $100,000 loan is not a small thing, and I wonder to what degree, I know it has to be approved by the CO, but what degree even council should be engaged in something like as a loan of that substance. It's one thing to have a small grant administered by a third party, but that's getting to the point of being somewhat significant. And so I'd be curious to hear more about options we have in that area. Thanks.
Councillor Twinney?
Thank you. This is a workshop, so we can't make any decisions, but you're here to obviously hear feedback from us. So just from some of the discussions, some of the comments that were made, I think that I like to see, I asked a bit about the Trails Committee going to our strategic priorities meeting, and I have to tend to agree that I think this is the time for the feedback. So that is a committee that I would like to see put in place, but I like the idea of maybe not in the way of our regular traditional committees, but maybe like as Regional Councillor Taylor said, maybe a roundtable discussion once a year, get people to come in from the community and give their feedback on ideas or thoughts about what we can do to improve things. So maybe that's the route to go with that one. I do like the idea of maybe quarterly meetings. Sometimes I think that's what's tasking on people is every month. You know what I mean? It's tough for them to come in every single month, and that's where we end up with issues with quorum. So perhaps quarterly meetings and still getting those minutes though, and sending them back to council though for us to make sure that we're seeing what's happening at those committee times as well. So those are just just want to reiterate some of the discussions that were made here so that you have that feedback so that you can make your recommendations. I guess the graffiti, the other one we didn't talk about really was a graffiti abatement committee, and I guess that's where, we do have an ongoing issue and problem with graffiti. If not, it's even worse than it even was before when we had the committee. So, but I think a lot of us generally just work with staff in that aspect, so I have to agree with that, I don't think I don't see maybe the point or purpose of it when we maybe look at it more of a staff committee on that issue, bringing in different levels of different departments in, and including our feedback of what we're seeing out there and what's going on to that committee.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of good options are being offered here in terms of a forum as opposed to the rote processes that we used to have in terms of having community engagement. So I think the idea of introducing forums, getting some ideas, and then in many cases, if it's part of our strategic priorities, having staff develop a plan and then come back and review that maybe a year later at another forum. So I like the way that you've approached this and exploring other options. The other item that we might want to give some thought to is webinars and those kinds of things, technology meetings that enable people to not necessarily have to leave home, but be able to contribute to some committee meetings. And there are some committees now, if we can deal with the echo on a conference call or a webinar, then we can, I think, have effective discussions as well. And so, things are changing. People are becoming a little more technology enabled themselves. So that might be another option. But I like the idea of the youth task force or the youth forum and what might come out of that. I like the idea of a general community discussion about what's important to us, and I think trails and parks fit in there, and having an annual discussion, develop a plan coming out of that discussion, and then maybe a year later review the progress that we've made there. So you've done a great job. I know there's a lot of work, but thank you for bringing that forward. And unless there's any additional discussions, Mr. Shelton,
well,
would you like to?
Mr. Mayor, maybe specific to this, and then I don't know if the director wants to add a concluding comment, but just on the strategic priority setting session, the point that was made, first the priorities need to be established, and then the committees and the form that they take and so on can be shaped to be aligned with the priorities. So step one is to get your priorities established. Step two is then the implementation part of it, which would relate into committee structures. So just to reinforce that point. And then on the Library Town Task Force, That was established to try to set efficiencies in place in terms of the library and potentially move to a model where the library focuses on its core services, core mandate library services, not so much on the back office support. So I think that the only way that that task force would be successful is if there is a move at a higher level to move to that model, which some municipalities do have, where support such as financial, communications, IT, and so on are within the town organization as opposed to, having two sets of similar positions. So if council is interested in that discussion, then you could determine whether you want to have some form of task force that would look at specific outcomes and where you'd like to go in terms of efficiency.
Okay, thank you. Andrew? Regional Councillor?
So I'd just like to say I'd be very interested in that, and I think if the task force were going to continue to sort of specifically with a time frame to specifically look at exactly how that could be implemented, operationalized, and with a set of recommendations, then I think it'd be very valuable, and I hope that could occur and the library board could support that direction, and I think it would be a good step for the town and for the library.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Sheldon?
And if I could just add to that, I think that sort of decision and direction should really be in the background as you get into your appointments to the library board, to ensure that the library board members, both around the council table and out in the public, do support that approach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only other comment I would add is that this is just the sort of first opportunity, and any other feedback or thoughts that you might have after you've maybe had an opportunity to adjust some of the discussion, I'd welcome that by email or phone, and appreciate your thoughts.
Great. Thank you. Regional Councillor?
So I'm just trying to see where this is going. I agree that, I guess what I was saying about the strategic priorities, I just didn't want us to get into a lot of discussions about, this committee could go with that. I mean, I think we need to know what our strategic priorities are before we finalize committee structure, et cetera, et cetera. But where does this go then? Are we going to see now something come back from yourselves after strategic priorities that sort of takes a lot of what's said and say, okay, here's a couple of models or here's one model? Is that, and when would we see that?
Through Mr. Mayor, I would probably assume February, March, probably March, realistically. But
At a committee of the whole, or?
Yes, at
okay.
committee of the whole, so that there's a recommended structure.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Final comments, Andrew?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, well, you've done a great job, and since this is a workshop, we can't adjourn, but we can stop working and stop shopping.
Sure,
Okay,
I
Regional
can't
Council.
stop talking apparently though. One more request. Could we, because I think it's going to be such a big leap from here, and if there are potentially a fairly significant shift in how we've done business, before it comes to committee of the whole for decision, would it be possible to have a draft go out to us, give us a comment period of 5 days and just generic comments for you to think about again, and then bring it to committee of the whole? Because I think there's a lot that's going to shift between now and then, and to get it as an item on an agenda would be hard to muck through.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the other piece in this too is because the appointment committee's mandate is to generally advise on these type of things, I probably would take a draft through that body, but I could certainly circulate it to all of council, of course.
Yeah, I'd like it to go to all accounts. Yeah, I think the appointment committee is about appointing people. This is about really structurally at the town, how we're changing and shifting.
Yeah, it would be good for members of council to understand the initial recommendations. Also, I think that in terms of circulating the drafts, it might be good to share that with people who've been engaged in the committees as well, so that we can get some of their feedback as we go forward too. Okay? All right, then a motion to adjourn. Sorry? Oh, that's right. That's all I see here. Okay, all right, if we have to have a second half, let's do the second half, all right? Yeah, that's right. Why don't we take a bit of a break and then come back to the second half? I'm sorry, I didn't see any material on the next piece, so that's why So we'll reconvene, say, at 10:30, take a bit of a break. Now, Kelly, do you want to do that picture? Okay. I wonder if we could just, if members of council could join us maybe in the lobby. Glenn Murray has got a project going forward with respect to the anti-bullying thing coming up. And he's asked if council would
Yeah.
Okay, I'll reconvene the workshop, and I'll ask Mr. McDougall to give us an overview and introduction to the Recreation Playbook, which clearly is on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just wanted to just say a couple of things before I turn it over to Colin Service, the Director of Recreation and Culture. Today is a very important step forward in the development of the Recreation Playbook. And specifically what you'll hear about today is just a good contextual piece which really will spark an initial discussion on the part of council, but really is going to help inform and outline the process that will be going on in terms of ongoing community engagement, so that the end goal of the session today, and ultimately the process that Colin is going to outline in terms of the citizen jury, it's a very unique and distinct process that is going to set Newmarket apart from other communities that are developing recreation master plans. This process has been very unique from the get-go in terms of how it's being done. It's being very strategic in terms of the use of outside consulting resources. We're doing a lot by engaging the staff, engaging the community through volunteers, and as well some of the engagement strategies that are in place are going to get a deeper consultation and be something that other communities I know are going to emulate following this process, because it will be more financially efficient in terms of what comes out. The quality of the product at the end of the day will be better, and it will really, really speak to the residents having the opportunity to help inform council's discussion and debate. And so one of the things that will come out today, will be talking about the process that will come out of today's discussion. And I just wanted to kind of close on saying that out of that process that Colin will outline, council will have the opportunity then to have a very informed discussion based on representative comments from the community that are garnered through the citizen jury process, so that at the end it's going to be comments you'll hear through the IVR survey that was done, comments through the citizen jury, the overall community consultation, all be summarized for you, so that you can have a full and substantive conversation around pricing, around philosophy, and then ultimately from there, council will then, at a date not far from that conversation, will see some recommendations, and it will be coinciding with the timeline as outlined through the playbook, which we are on target for. So, all that said, in terms of introductory comments, I'd like to turn over to Colin Service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. There's really two objectives that I want to highlight today. The first is that I'm going to provide a bit of an update as to where we're at with the development of the Recreation Playbook and some of our accomplishments to date. And then we are going to, as Ian outlined, get into a bit of a discussion about a process to further the dialogue around pricing philosophy and the development of a pricing policy. So without any further ado, I will head on. The first thing that I wanted to highlight in doing this was really setting the context of why we're actually doing a recreation playbook. Part of the process that we've gone through has included a very intense digital campaign that saw the creation of a number of videos. And this video in particular is our camp video, and it really encapsulates why we're going through this process. So if we can just take a moment to watch the video.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh. You can count on me.
What we particularly like about that video is that, first of all, every image that you saw was one of our own programs. And it really does capture what we were trying to capture in the concept of doing the Recreation Playbook under a very different approach with really engaging this community. You'll recall this was a slide that was presented just over a year ago when we came to council in a workshop to talk about an approach to developing the Recreation Playbook. And our intention was to develop a plan that's well beyond the ordinary, consistent with the rest of Newmarket's vision. It's also, we really wanted to use this as an opportunity to ignite the community, joining in the conversation, to shape the way that they play. That's been our tagline throughout this process, is shape the way you play. And everything that we've done has really been about engaging the community and getting them involved in the discussion. And you'll see there's a number of staff within the department here today. I can say quite honestly that this has been a process that's involved the entire department to also be engaged in the discussion and to have those conversations with the community as a whole. Any good strategic document, the purpose of it is to verify that our existing services and facilities are meeting the needs and to determine what we need to do over the next 10 years to continue doing that. I just want to quickly again highlight some of the differences in our approach versus traditional approach. This has been a staff-led approach where we've engaged external consultants where it can vary, where it can improve the overall process and contribute to the process in a way, providing expertise that staff might not have had. Some of the information that will be shared today was actually generated with the help of an external consultant. The hope had been that he would be here today. Unfortunately, he comes from BC, and the cost to bring him here was one factor, but also he had a death in the family late last week, so he wasn't able to be here. But he and I have worked closely over the last couple of months to prepare the information, and he's been instrumental. And I'll get into more depth about him later. We also have engaged an external consultant to conduct a facility peer review, which I will also talk about in a few minutes. The real highlight for us has been the extensive and innovative public engagement process, which again, I'm going to get into that. The ultimate goal, though, is to have a document that every single person in the Recreation and Culture Department knows, understands, and uses to guide the decisions they make every single day, and to have a document that helps council make informed decisions moving forward and can provide direction moving forward when it comes to making some difficult decisions. So this is the approach that we've been embarking upon. The public engagement stuff really happens January through December, the meat of it. The citizens jury is the final piece of that, and I'll again speak to that. We have conducted a facility peer review. It's in draft form right now. Our intention is to present that to council in February, so we will bring the consultants in for that presentation, and they'll have an opportunity to explain their recommendations. But really what that facility review, the purpose of that document was to look at a number of studies that have already been done in Newmarket and verify whether the findings still hold true, whether the population's changed enough to warrant new findings, and to compare Newmarket against other similar sized municipalities. So it looks at other municipalities in the 100,000 range, 80 to 100,000 range, and looks at whether we're offering the right kinds of facilities in comparison to those other municipalities. It doesn't take into account what the public is saying they want, just a very neutral look at what other municipalities are providing. And that was very deliberate so that we weren't getting something that was swayed by opinion, but that was purely factual on what other municipalities have versus what we have. That brings us to today's workshop, that we're going to talk a little bit about pricing philosophy. And then we're going to conduct a citizens jury, and I will spend a lot of time talking about that process today. Once that process is completed, before any decisions are made, there will be an opportunity for council, as Ian highlighted in his opening remarks, to really review all of the information that we've gathered, including the citizens jury, and then be able to make some informed decisions around philosophies around pricing. Then from there, we'll sort of finalize all of our recommendations, test those draft recommendations with a final report to come back to council in April of this year. So I'm going to take a moment just to highlight these are the things that have been accomplished already from an engagement standpoint. We, as I mentioned, did a digital campaign that included videos that really led to an online survey. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of participants in that online survey. And that survey focused really on 3 themes. One was around programs and services and satisfaction with those programs and services in the areas where there may be gaps. It focused on the facilities that, again, satisfaction and gaps. And then it focused on price and satisfaction and gaps around those things. Through the community engagement survey, we were able to take advantage of an IVR phone survey that happened after the community engagement survey, and so those results will be shared with you. And then we've conducted focus groups at all Newmarket high schools. We've conducted a number of focus groups with our existing program participants. We had a number of PICs that were very focused. So we did one that was we actually did 2 that were geared towards seniors that were held at the Newmarket Seniors Meeting Place, though they weren't only for members. It was for any older adult. We did a focused use PIC with our sport user groups, and also at the Newmarket Youth Center, and really engaging the youth population. We had an event street team, so you probably saw us out and about over the last year at either Winterfest, Home Show, Farmers Market, July 1st Canada Day, Discovery Nights, the Moonlight Movies, Music in the Park, Newmarket, Docs on Ice, Community Sports Registration Day, and Chalk Days, which was basically that event street team, just showed up in random places around town and really engaged youth in doing chalk art. And while they were doing that, there was staff talking to parents about their feedback. So we've tried very, very hard to give the entire community as much opportunity as possible to provide input into this process. And that also included the Playbook wristband campaign, where people were wearing those black wristbands, and if you were spotted wearing one of those wristbands, you had the opportunity to win prizes. And we've also done a number of community stakeholder interviews. So these are individuals that were interviewed that were identified some by members of council and by senior staff and staff within the department. Anyone who is identified as somebody who is a leader or has a significant stake in the recreation and leisure business, they were interviewed individually, and we can still continue to do those interviews if there's someone that you wanted to see interviewed. So that gives us a bit of the background as to what's been accomplished to date. Before I move on, if you wanted to ask questions, by all means, please feel free to do that, or I can just wait until the end, whatever.
Might be better if we go through the presentation and come back to, we'll make notes as we go through, and then you can come back to those.
Sounds good. The hope today is really to have a bit of a discussion around price and subsidy. And these are quotes taken directly, or recommendations, I should say, taken directly from master plans from across the province. Typically, the way price and pricing philosophy is handled within the context of a master plan is that it's a recommendation to develop something later. And what we wanted to do differently in this process was really embed the pricing philosophy as a fundamental component of our recreation playbook. So rather than just have one standard recommendation that says we need to address this later, we wanted to build some key philosophical statements around price right into the playbook. To do that, we are conducting this workshop, and then we're going to be conducting a citizens jury. Before I get into the citizens jury, I do want to stress that we've received a lot of feedback already through the IVR phone survey and through the various engagement pieces that we've done already around price. And so our intention is to catalog all of that data and share it with you so that you have what the public is telling us already, so that you can make some informed decisions when the time comes. But the other mechanism we wanted to employ to really give you the opportunity to have strong community feedback as to what the community feels around price is to do a citizens jury. And so what a citizens jury will be is a group of demographically representative members of this community who will explore some of the issues that we're going to talk about today, and make recommendations to council for consideration around price, so that you then have yet another vehicle to use to make your decisions, because price is obviously a very sensitive topic to this community, and so we want to arm you with as much data as possible in order to present or make those recommendations. Okay. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the data. You were handed out a very large white paper document. That was written by a man by the name of Brian Johnson, who owns a company called Perk Consulting out of British Columbia. So he's the gentleman that I had hoped could have been here today that we've been working with. And so that document, I'm going to give you the Coles Note version of that document right now, but you have it for reference point for reading at a later date. But in his document, he talks about how there's really 4 types of providers of recreation. There's municipal, private sector, institutional, and individually sponsored. So municipal obviously is us. Private sector would be those who are strictly in it to make money. Institutional is really referring to things like hospitals or in some cases military may do their own sort of recreational opportunities, or prisons would be another example where it's an institution that has to provide recreation for those who are utilizing that institution. Individually sponsored recreation just refers to what you choose to do that's not organized in any way, shape, or form. If you want to go for a walk in the forest, that would be individually sponsored recreation, or if you want to go for a run. There's this sort of that 5th category that refers to not-for-profit, things like the YMCA. For the purposes of this, he's defining YMCA to fall sort of in discussions with him between sort of right in here. It would be between municipal and private, and it would sort of fall somewhere in there. And when you look at the motivating factors as to why, money is always somewhat in the equation when you're looking at services that you're considering. And so there's really three philosophies. There's you're making a profit, in which case you charge fees that cover more than the costs themselves so that you've generated a profit, and the profit goes to offset those, or it goes into the pockets of those who've provided the capital. There's breaking even, so that no money leaves or enters. So basically, the service is offered in a way that it sustains itself, but no one's actually making money off of it, or that it's actually offered at a loss, and that there's an additional source contributing to that money. In cases of municipalities, it's taxes. In cases of not-for-profits, it could be grants, government grants. It could be user fees from others that offset that, those kinds of things. And so really, if you look at it from that perspective, there really is only the 3 ways to approach it. When you look at it, take that information and provide it into this chart, it's suggesting that a private business, their only motivation is to make a profit at the end of the day. Very few private businesses are going in there to break even or at a loss, because they wouldn't survive. They wouldn't continue to exist if that's how they approached it. A quasi-public, that's again like a YMCA is a great example where they're actually not there to make a profit. They're a non-profit organization, so any money that's generated that's a surplus goes back into the organization. So they're there to either break even as a primary activity or to provide somewhat of a loss, but again, they won't sustain themselves over the long haul if they do that. Whereas a public entity, we are really, taxpayers do subsidize our recreation as it stands right now, and that is what you would find typically. I don't know of a municipality that exists that doesn't have some kind of tax subsidy on the recreation and culture portfolios. And so they're there to provide affordable services for the masses. And so that's the primary objective. And so that ends up coming at a loss, meaning that taxes subsidize the remaining amount. So then the natural question that comes from there, as posed by Brian in his paper, is should a municipal government provide any public leisure service then, if it's doing so at a loss, and the motivation is a loss ultimately? And if the question is that yes, we should, then which services should it provide? Obviously, I'm not going to sit before you as the Director of Recreation and Culture and suggest that we shouldn't be providing that, because I really like my job. And so I want to stay. So the reality is, I think, as a municipality, we've accepted that we're in that business and we provide those services, and we believe there's value in those services. So it becomes a question of which services should we provide. That becomes shaped by our philosophy, our goals, and our objectives. So the philosophy is what we believe, our goals is what we want to achieve over the long term, and the objectives are how we want to achieve those goals over the short term. There are two very common approaches that Brian's identified in his paper, two common philosophies that sort of dictate a lot of municipalities. One is public demand, and that's essentially saying that if the public demands it, then that's what we offer. There are problems with that approach, in that often the loudest people who demand something aren't always reflective of the true public. And so when you have something that's focused solely on public demand, you risk that you risk catering to only those who speak the loudest. On the opposite end of the spectrum is an intrinsic value. So it's the belief that recreation is good for individuals. It's good for the community as a whole. And so then you look at offering services that are good for you, that provide that internal and satisfaction. The reality is if taxpayers' money is used to subsidize it, it can't be justified solely on the intrinsic value, because that's a very individualized, my intrinsic value to recreation could be very different than any one of yours. But you also can't look solely on meeting stated demand, because there's that whole criteria, or that whole section of people that haven't had the opportunity to express that demand. So if you kind of look at marrying the two, this is a goal statement, again, contained within his paper. May or may not be right, but I think it is a nice reflection that it says basically that we use the delivery of public leisure services to further growth and development of the community. So when we are embarking on offering services, it's with one intent, is to help this community grow and become better. The other is that we offer growth and development for the individual in the context of how it benefits the community as a whole. Okay? So if you look at those two sort of goals, community growth or individual growth, and you look at what we offer right now, things can be sort of categorized. In Brian's paper, he talks about 21 factors. I think in the case of Newmarket's context, it's more like 18 factors that really fall into these two categories. So community growth, things like special events. We offer a number of events that bring this community together, bring opportunity for people to celebrate community, to enjoy, to meet people, to enjoy each other, that kind of thing. And that really does enhance community growth. We provide support to local groups, so that whether it be through permitting and providing facility space to local groups, whether it be working with things like our outdoor rink projects, and working with the community groups that have emerged that are less formalized but have emerged to, again, support community. That's part of our role, is to support those groups, help them to grow. Exposure to sporting events, really, and exposure to the arts, that's really referring to the concept of exposure to opportunities to see professional and to become a spectator in those things. We also create social functions and opportunities for community gathering and social opportunity, protecting natural resources, or really looking at enjoying the environment. We have a very extensive trail system that affords that opportunity. And then beautifying the community, family-oriented services. Again, there's this school of thought that a community grows when you offer things for the whole family. And then the last thing that we don't do really well yet, but that we know and we've identified there's real opportunity to do, is that when you integrate generations and subgroups, when you can look at who your typical demographics are and how we can create opportunities for them to work together and learn and grow from each other. On the individual side, we offer a number of fitness related things and overall well-being type programs. We have those preschool leisure opportunities, basic leisure skill development for children, advanced leisure skill development for children. So that could be things like introductory sort of dance classes to more advanced dance classes. Same thing for adults. We have leisure skill development for adults, leisure skill development for basic and advanced for adults. We also have older adult leisure opportunities. Reflection and escape simply refers to opportunities for people to leave the ordinariness of their lives or the busyness of their lives and have an opportunity to learn something new. And then communication is really, that's identifying the way that we engage this community. And through this process and through the public engagement strategy that we've employed, as a department, we've become better at really engaging the community and really understanding and having conversations with the community. And that's critical to the overall objectives. So this is a benefits continuum, and the concept with this is that if you go back up a slide to this, to this slide, and you look at, take special events, for example. And then you go back to this slide. If you look at special events, where it falls on this benefits continuum. So if it's something that completely benefits the community as a whole, then it would fall closer to this end on the continuum, so that you would charge less in user fees. You'd have greater tax support because the community benefit is greater. If it's something that, if you go back again up a slide to something on this side where it's advanced leisure skill development for an adult, for example. So say that's an advanced cooking class. That probably has less benefit to the community as a whole. So instead of falling on this side, it would fall more towards a recovery rate closer to the 100%. So that's the concept that Brian's developed in his benefits continuum. Another way of looking at it would be to and I appreciate this is really small, so I apologize for that, but it's identifying that something that has significant good to the public as a whole could fall under 0% recovery rate, so any costs are completely absorbed by the tax base, versus 100% of the tax base. So if there's absolutely no community good, but there's significant individual gain, then that would fall under closer to the 100% mark. His suggestion is that you look at it in 5 intervals. I've seen other municipalities that have employed this approach and not stopped at 100%. They've gone on to 125% or even 150%, with the concept that when you generate a profit on some services, that money can then go and offset or create more opportunities for those 0% services. And so this is one model, but there's options to that model. His work stops there, though. It suggests that you look at it completely holistically and that you don't consider any of the external factors. You simply look at about the overall benefit to the community as your guiding principle in your pricing. The factor that we have to encounter and overlay into that is that an individual's ability to pay is an impact. So an example, if you kind of go back up to this continuum, if we chose to say a service was 50% of its cost, say we decided drop-in basketball was going to be 50% of its costs, because there's individual gain, but there's also some community gain because it's getting kids off the street, so that's the community gain, but it's also skill development for those individuals, so we believe it belongs at that 50% mark. There will be children in this community and youth in this community who can't afford that 50% number still, even though that's what's determined. And that's where his work stops, is that it doesn't address that concept of ability to pay. There is also willingness to pay, which we live in a municipality that's very accessible to other municipalities. There's some municipalities you can go to, you're going to drive an hour before you hit a serious competition, and that's not the case with us. So people could choose to go to Aurora, and do in fact choose to go to Aurora or go to East Gwillimbury or go to Whitchurch-Stouffville because the prices they feel may be better. So we have a real market issue that we have to consider. And we have the private sector's involvement and whether or not we compete with the private sector or if we get out of those kinds of businesses altogether. So moving forward, what is suggested is that we need to look at not only that benefits continuum, but overlay that with direction around ability to pay and willingness to pay. And that leads us to this whole concept of a citizen's jury. And so what is suggested as the approach is that the citizen's jury will take all of these categories of services, and some of these actually, to be frank, get even further subdivided. So things like basic leisure skill development for a child, there could be philosophically a case to be made that aquatics is very different than karate, so that we may want to subsidize aquatics more than we want to subsidize karate, because swimming is a life skill that if we can prevent drowning, we prevent a lot of other things from the community. So it's not quite as simple as looking at these 18. There are subsets of that, but the premise is that the citizens' jury would look at these criteria of services and place it where they feel it belongs on the benefits continuum. So ignore the ability to pay and willingness to pay for a time, park that issue, and look at it and identify where it belongs on the benefits continuum. They will make those decisions based on a series of testimonies and expert witnesses. So we're not going to just sit them in a room and say, okay, here you go, now make your decisions. It would be that we would provide them with insight as to issues around senior social issues, for example, or youth poverty issues in this community. We would provide context and information that would enable them to make informed decisions on where those services belong. So that would be the first criteria, or first objective of the citizens jury. The second objective would then look at how we address ability to pay and willingness to pay. So do we look at ability to pay and ignore that altogether, or do we look at adding a subsidy program on top of that? Those are the kinds of questions that the citizens jury would then grapple with. From there, the citizens jury's recommendations will be given to council along with all of the other public data that we have, so that when you do want to make decisions about pricing philosophy, you're armed with as much possible data that we can give you about what the public's suggesting and how the public feels about those issues. In order to ensure that the citizens jury data is valid, we've come up with an approach that looks at, I say, a group of 15 individuals. It could be 13, it could be 20. 15 isn't a magic number. It's there's flexibility with that. But what we did to randomly select and make them demographically representative is that we looked at the work of Environics Analytics. And for those of you who are familiar with the work, I apologize, but for the recap. But quickly, Environics Analytics has developed a PRISM segmentation. And through that PRISM segmentation, what that means is that they've classified every neighborhood in Canada into one of 66 clusters. And each cluster has demographic profile to it. So it'll include things like income, it'll include education levels, it'll include ethnicity, it'll include whether there's children or not, types of professions. Those are all things that are included within that cluster. In the town of Newmarket, there are only 6 of the 66 clusters present, which I don't think would be shocking to anyone. When you look at a city of Toronto, they don't even have all 66. So when you look at Newmarket, we're not as diverse as some communities, and so that's why we have those 6. So what we did then was look at what percentage of the population is representative of each cluster, and then sent random letters to homes within each of those clusters, and asked if they would be interested, explained the citizens jury process, asked if they'd be interested in participating. From there, they have to then fill out a questionnaire, because the letter only goes to the household. So in the example of my house, it could be me or it could be my wife that would participate. We don't want a citizens jury that's all mothers on it, or all single women on it, or all single men. We want a mixture of different people within the household. So from there, they have to fill out a questionnaire that has a numerical code to it, so we don't see any names. And we make sure that we, again, have a balance of demographics within that. And then from there, we actually invite that jury to participate. And we will take them for an entire weekend where we provide them with those testimonies and those witnesses. Then they will deliberate, make recommendations, and then those recommendations will come back to council for consideration within the context of all of that other information that we'll provide. So I think that explains that. So what we're really here to discuss today, first of all, is to answer any questions on the process so far, if you have any questions, ensuring that there's a strong understanding of the benefits continuum and that it actually makes sense to you, and your impressions on the citizens jury approach, whether you feel that will be helpful or not. And then from there, we'll go through, again, in detail, the next steps and then any additional considerations. So I'll open it to you now for questions.
I'll take a look at the queue. Councillor Kerwin.
Oh, just, I don't know about my other colleagues, but when the meeting is over, I'm absolutely impressed by your staff in the audience. I think it's fantastic. And I look out there and I try to know the staff as well as possible. I know about 60% of the staff in the audience. But you have a young and dynamic and youthful group out there, and I would like to meet them after the meeting, Colin. Part of my strength is knowing my staff. And I say my staff because I work with them all the time. And I like that. And I compliment you and your staff over the years and how recreation and culture has grown positively. We had a conversation at the spaghetti dinner last night down at the community center with people from Aurora, and they love Newmarket because of there's an event almost every weekend or through the week, whether it's the movies or whether it's the community center or whatever it is. At one time, it was called Parks and Recreation until our current CAO stole away parks into operations, and you were left with one wing. But now the bird is flying with both wings, and I must say that you're bringing attributes to the town of Newmarket. So I just ask when it's all over, I would like your staff to, if they would, and I don't know my colleagues, I would like to meet them, because I was overwhelmed just a few minutes ago when they all came in, and I said, my heavens, I don't know them. I don't know some of them, and I've always worked with recreation and now culture. So congratulations to the accolades that you're bringing to the town of Newmarket in this innovative recreation playbook. I love it, and I'll become more involved in it.
Thank you. Councillor Twinney?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's been something I've been really looking forward to coming forth. I know the community engagement that you guys have done, your group and everybody has been wonderful. It's been fun and exciting. It's been engaging, and it's certainly really interesting what what we've got presented so far. Looking forward to reading the white pages that you gave us today. Just a quick question. I do like the idea of the jury, the citizens jury. Is it? When has that approach already started? Did you say, or you've already sent that out there? So you're in the middle of it? They're waiting for responses to come back. Is that where things are at?
We've sent out a letter, the introductory letter to the random households, and they're in the process of filling out the questionnaires now. So we're not. We've started the process, but we're not so far in the process that it can't be tweaked or improved upon.
Right. So through you, Mr. Mayor, so you're expecting to do when this weekend? Is it something that? I guess where I'm getting at is, when is this sort of going to be finalized? Are we looking at this being all finalized so that we have all that information going into 2016 budget, I guess? Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this coming, late spring, will you think you'll be doing the weekend with the residents? Or?
No, our hope is to do it in February, actually, towards the end
soon.
of February, and then take all of that information and because we want, our goal is really to embed the concepts, the pricing philosophy concepts as a guiding document into the recreation playbook.
Right.
We want to provide you with that information in advance of so it's going to be 2 sessions. One will be to consider the price concept. So you'll have that opportunity to review those recommendations, and then from there you'll make your approvals or recommendations or whatever as a council you'll decide to do. So you'll finalize that component of it,
right,
so that it can then be embedded in the playbook for April of this year, and then that will shape all future budgets.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. And just one more, sort of through Mr. O'Brien, one more comment. You mentioned about the cost recovery, and you said some municipalities will actually look at, making a profit, just like the private sector would on some, I guess, not events, but some services.
Yep.
Is that something that you decide not to look at? Or, I'm not saying it's the right thing or the wrong thing, I don't know, but it's interesting concept. That's something that is, comparable maybe to something that's a little bit more, people would be more interested in paying a little bit more, and then that would offset the costs and other things. Is that approach that we would consider, or?
Yeah, I think...
is that maybe the jury, citizens
exactly,
jury, part of that would actually put that out there and see what their thoughts are? Would that be...
Exactly.
Done?
Yeah,
okay.
that was the intention, was to get the public's feedback on whether they feel that's a good strategy or not. And
okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Regional Councillor.
Thanks very much. Like others, I just want to say this is amazing work you've been doing. I think we've all been following it and been impressed, but to really see it sort of laid out and come together like this. Just to all staff, you're making us look amazing, and I'm sure you've enjoyed the process as a team, because it's cutting edge in my opinion, and it's fantastic work. The questions I have, one question I do have is several questions actually, but the one is I believe, and I think it speaks a little bit to how it's framed, that I'm not positive. I'm pretty sure, but is this the Culture and Recreation Playbook or the Recreation Playbook? You use leisure services once you get in or into the report, but even that's not 100% clear.
That's a great question. It is a recreation playbook because we do have a culture master plan.
True.
But the reality is that we're defining recreation through this playbook as what people choose to do with their time. So there is a natural spillover into some of the cultural services that we provide, and that line of culture versus recreation is somewhat arbitrarily defined by us. And so we want to remove that line and say it's really about the individual in this community, and our whole approach and our whole process has tried to be about the community member and what they define. So it's not so much about the arbitrary line that I place, but it's more about putting them at the center of the whole paradigm and saying, what do you define as what you want to do with your time?
Right. So. Right. And I guess I'd say that, yeah, that there's, as you said, the resident doesn't see the distinction as much, and as well, probably not the distinction, to an earlier point, between what you do with your time in terms of recreation, culture, but also in terms of the library. And I know the library just went through a master planning process as well, but there's got to be some gray area or areas of overlap there as well, and I'll be interested to see how the public feedback comes in and sort of blurs these, even though you're trying to take a certain slice.
Yeah.
Then I just want to say that the benefits continuum I think is excellent too. I think I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to move us away a little bit from thinking sort of somewhat without, or on a more subjective basis than an objective. The subjective one of being always has been, well, if it's kids, then we support it more. And is that the right way to think about it? Is it? And I think this is moving us to a bit more of a nuanced and a sophisticated approach about where the benefit lies and where the level of support or subsidy should go. So I really like where that's heading. The one question I have is, when you're looking at this and with the jury, you're looking at a range from 0 to 100. You said you could go even beyond 100. But at the 0 level, does the question get asked, or does the jury start to weigh in on whether, not that you have to tie it to the 0 level or the 0 range, but do we start to say, is this a, and you talked about it at the very beginning, but if there's no subsidy involved, which means it is kind of one of the reasons why government is involved usually, should we be providing it all? Why are we in this space? Is that getting explored?
Yeah.
By the jury as well?
Yes. So,
okay.
and by the very essence of the question of where it falls on the continuum, part of that question is, does it belong on the continuum in the first place?
Right.
And that's part of that, answering that question.
Okay. And then the last one, a couple of questions about the jury. You sent out letters to, obviously you didn't send it 15 letters because you're not going to get all 15, so you sent out 100, 200?
1,000.
1,000?
Yeah.
Well, you should get your 15, I would suspect of that.
That's our hope.
The other question I had about the jury was the demographics. The environics, it controls for a lot, and to a degree, by looking at things like age, socioeconomic, occupation, you start to get to another area, but I'm not sure it fully does. And I guess the only thing I'm a little concerned about or interested in, let's say, is, and I'm really not bringing politics into this, I'm bringing it in a small p way, which is a small l versus a small c, liberal conservative, and that can mean a huge amount in this. If you're overriding philosophy and you happen to get 10 people with an overriding philosophy that small government is good, or government should be out of so many things, or the opposite. And I know environics. Are you comfortable that the environics categories cover that enough that we won't get too big of a grouping in just a small sample of 15 that could skew things one way or another?
I'm comfortable that the process that we're going to use will get us there. So the process started with the environics stuff, but it doesn't end there. So the environics was just a way to determine where we send the 1,000 letters. Through the questionnaire after that, that we evaluate based on and specifically, just to give everyone a bit of context, those who aren't as familiar with embryonics, one of the clusters, they name their clusters to coincide with sort of attributes that are catchy about that. And so I would fall under the pets and PCs would be the cluster that I would fall under, which is age 35 to 45, children at home, certain kind of income, live in a certain part of town, that kind of stuff. And it would say predominantly white would be part of the PC. So what we want to do is also then take just pure census data that looks at things like ethnicity. So we want to make sure if 20% of the population were Asian, that 20% of the jury were Asian. So that's the whole purpose of that secondary part of looking at the questionnaire. And again, the questionnaire is numerically coded, so we're not looking at names. We're not going to stack the jury with individuals. But I believe and we can also look at that in that second questionnaire, we'll also establish things like age and time in the country, that kind of stuff. So I think that between both, I feel confident we're going to get a balanced jury.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broom-Plumley.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Ian started this out very well by saying that Newmarket is set apart from other municipalities. I noticed a tremendous change in what you're doing, I guess, starting at the home show. And I like it. I like it a lot. My family uses the facilities as a family, and that seems to be a little bit new, and I'm really enjoying that. And when I participate in any of the services that you're providing, all the staff are engaged, they're involved. Any staff member anywhere are well informed, they're very engaged, and they are going well beyond the ordinary, which I really like. And it also is a great testament having them all here. I recognize a lot of them. I also recognize a lot of faces from your video, and I really like that communication that you're using our own residents in those videos, and I hope that continues. My family recently participated in one of your party packages, Nerf Wars, and my 5-year-old found it hard to believe that he was actually allowed to shoot his friends, and that he had an absolutely fantastic birthday experience, and since then 6 parents have booked that package. So your word of mouth is also working, which I think is important. So I love everything you're doing. I'm very happy and looking forward to seeing some of these statistics that you've worked so hard to present, and I believe based on what I've seen it's going to be very positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may just add some context, there was a great question asked earlier by the regional councillor in terms of the cultural master plan and the recreation playbook, and I just wanted to add a little bit to that because in the past it was a very intentional exercise and effort that the community developed its first standalone cultural master plan, and then now we're going through a recreation master plan, which is the playbook. The intent right now, subject to any direction otherwise from council, is to remain to have the cultural master planner stand alone as its own, and we would be moving towards doing an update in that regard, so that the playbook is really focused on more active recreation, and on a very intentional basis, the cultural master plan, because it is something that we're really trying to have a paradigm shift in this community around the role of arts and culture, and to do so we need to make sure it has a proper and distinct focus. And so that's why we've taken the approach of having them as 2 separate exercises. And when it comes to the cultural master plan, focusing on doing an update once we exhaust the 10 years of the initial plan. So right now, just to add some context to that question, this is really geared around more active community recreation, as the cultural master plan is geared towards arts and culture. There will be some references within that interweave, because it's impossible to totally have them as distinct. But from a strategic perspective, we see great value in having them looked at separate from one another.
Thank you. Councillor Bake.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for the information. And it is great that all the staff have come out here. So welcome, and I do appreciate you being here. I just have a few questions, and one part is a bit of a follow-up from our regional councillor, John Taylor. In the areas where perhaps we're looking at zero subsidy, and I just want a little bit more explanation and perhaps even some examples, do you mean, for instance, that because Newmarket has an abundance of fitness programs, why are we competing with them, therefore we shouldn't be offering those programs? Or are you suggesting that perhaps for-profit, anything that we would consider for-profit, and sometimes there's a bit of a fine line between for-profit and not-for-profit with some of our sports organizations, but anything that you're thinking for-profit, is it questioning why are we renting space to them, or we should be doing full recovery for them? So that's the first part of my question. I just want a little bit more information of what you mean by zero subsidy and what you have in mind.
Sure. I think I'm going to just go back to that continuum for a second. If you, actually, I'm going to go to this slide. I'm going to start by saying I don't have anything in mind specifically. Like I'm not going to sit here and suggest today that it's appropriate that fitness be 100% recovery or 150% recovery and preschool programs be 0%. So I'm not coming in here with any preconceived ideas. What I'm suggesting is that that's exactly what we want this citizens jury to tell us what they feel the community believes should be completely subsidized versus totally paid for by the user. And that's done by looking at it from a continuum perspective. And so you evaluate what's the greater community good. So if you wanted to look at that example of fitness, you would start by saying, okay, the individual is the first person that benefits. So as an adult, you could be at 100% recovery then, and you could leave it at that. Or you could start to then peel back the layers and suggest when you have fit and healthy adults, then there's a benefit to the medical system and there's less hospitalization. And so all of a sudden, it's no longer here, it starts to work its way back down. And so what really I'm focused on today is more about the process, not about where I believe things should go, but how we're going to educate the jury to make recommendations to council that are representative of how this community feels. Does that make sense?
Okay, and that's why that leads into my second question, probably explains why the process is great, but there really wasn't too much anything on specific activities or facilities. So that's going to come later in this process. Start looking at recommendations and what type of services we should be providing, as in addition to maybe services that we're not providing, what type of facilities, etc.
Yeah. Again, this is there's really three key themes that are going to come out of the recreation playbook, and so there will be a series of recommendations on each of those themes. One theme will be around facility provision. Do we have the right facilities? Are they accessible to the right people? Those kinds of things, or where we're missing it. So to accomplish that theme, we've first of all done the community engagement to hear their feedback, but we've also done that facility peer review, which will be presented to council in February by the consultants. We'll bring them in so that you'll have an opportunity to hear it. And that was a very neutral look at us compared to other municipalities. So that's addressing that facility provision component. The second theme is about service provision. And so again, we're looking at it from that same lens. What did the community tell us they're interested in? And then when you look at other providers that are out there, are we in the right kinds of services? And so there'll be recommendations around that theme. And then the third is around price. And so there will be recommendations within the playbook around price. Today, we're really focusing on understanding the price component, the price theme. That doesn't mean the other two themes will go away. They'll be built within the context of the recreation playbook as a whole.
So at some point in the future, and it sounds like it's going to be fairly close within the next few months,
yes,
we'll be looking at our services we're providing. Are we filling a gap, or are we actually competing with others? And there'll be that type of discussion.
Right, we will. And as that relates to price, the citizens jury may recommend, or may not, but they may recommend that we do go into that concept of out here 125 and 150% recovery so that we can then offer more 0%. That may be a strategy they recommend, or they could also recommend that we stick with a model like this, but that we build a really strong subsidy program to allow those who can't afford, or it could be a combination of both. And it's until that process has been encountered, anything I would be saying would be purely speculative. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bazans.
Mr. Mayor, I too want to echo my appreciation and delight in what you've accomplished so far, and to particularly applaud the creativity. When we had our briefing session, I was really quite impressed by the whole approach and looking at developing not a master plan, but a playbook in a very innovative and creative way, rather than taking, the old cookie cutter and giving us the same old, same old. So I applaud all of you and your team for its enthusiasm and creativity and willingness to champion innovation, because I think that's what's going to benefit the community the most at the end of the day. One of the questions, though, that I have with respect to the citizens jury and the peer facility review is whether the citizens jury will have that as part of their expert witness briefing, because I think they are obviously integrally combined. It's one thing to sort of have a wish list and idea of things that we'd like to do, but in many cases, it often depends on having a place or a facility to do it in. And that's really key as well then to considering what the cost is and how you factor in costs. So if you already have a facility, it's easy to sort of keep costs low, and if that facility has been paid for, you can keep costs relatively low and reasonable. But if it requires building new facilities to accomplish the provision of those services, that changes the financial equation quite dramatically. So I'm just wondering, with respect to the expert witnesses and the 70% of the weekend that's going to be educational, what are some of the components of that education, and to what degree will the citizens jury have information about the facilities review?
That's a great question. Thank you. They will, absolutely. To the first part of the question, they will be given that information, and we will bring that consultant. They've agreed to serve as an expert witness, so they'll have that availability. We will also we'll start with just an inventory and a better understanding of the services that we currently provide. So that will be provided by some of the staff members in that capacity. We'll also look at, and Analytics is going to come in and do a good job of painting a picture of what this community really looks like and where we're likely going as a community. So we'll also need to incorporate some of our own planning people to look at that as well. Then we will be doing invitations to a variety of the public service. York Region has also agreed to provide some insight from a social services kind of perspective. But then we also are looking and rounding up other experts to testify on things like seniors-related issues, on things like York Regional Police, and we're hoping that they'll be able to provide somebody about youth crime and those kinds of things, using some of the United Way expertise that's been developed. So those are all the resources we intend on tapping into and providing as much insight from outside of our own staff as well, and from the community as a whole. So.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
So just on the cultural master plan, am I correct in saying that the cultural master plan was a different type of master planning process in the sense that it was a higher level, and did it engage in a pricing philosophy review or a facilities review?
Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the regional councillor. Kind of yes and no to that. So there did speak to facilities within it, but on a higher level than some of the specifics that would go through this playbook process exercise. Because really, in terms of its maturation, recreation development within the community is a lot more mature than the cultural area is at this point. So there was some reference there around the specific pricing. That's one of the things that, as an example, would dovetail into this process, and that's where the line would be a little bit blended in a good way in terms of some of the programming around arts and culture. Some of that will be blended into the playbook process. But my point earlier was really just to speak to the fact that we still see value in having a standalone cultural focus, so it doesn't get lost as part of a recreation playbook process. So we still see that there's value in having both. But from a pricing perspective and on a program, so for instance, a Learn to Paint as an example, that may dovetail its way into the playbook exercise and then influence how that is priced in our guide and in the budget. And then as culture matures in the community, it will either come closer to a recreation playbook process in terms of looking at it specifically, or that will continue to be, one of those blended things that works into this exercise?
Yeah, I guess, and that all makes sense. The only thing I'd leave it at is I do believe in a standalone cultural master plan, but I ask staff to maybe just give some thought at the end of this process, is how does this speak to the existing cultural master plan, and how do now that we have a new recreation master plan or playbook, is there anything where that we need to think about the two of them? You don't. It's important to have a standalone because it gives it emphasis and gives it and moves it forward to the cultural one, but you don't want them to be completely separate either. And I hear there's overlap, but I suspect the overlap will be around things that are traditionally might be seen as more cultural, but are done through the recreation department, and theater probably will not have pricing implications through this. And so, how do they speak to each other after it's all done? I guess is an interesting question. The other thing, I guess.
Sorry, if I could just speak to that one point really quickly. And you're right, there is that component that has to be considered. And I think when you look at what the cultural master plan is as a document, that's very much been the motivation to make the recreation playbook what it is as a document, and that is that it becomes a living, breathing document that is referenced and utilized by staff on an ongoing basis. And that's one of the methods that we'll use to ensure that there's interplay between the two, is that they're living documents that don't just sit on a shelf, but that shape the way that we do business moving forward. Yeah. And so they will naturally be referred to by staff all the time, both documents. So, and that's not the only answer. There's more to it than that, but I just wanted to say that it's definitely that thought.
Yeah, and I would urge that same thought, although while I understand different governance and different issues in some ways, but the library master plan, I mean, you got 3 master plans that have a great deal of areas of overlap and occupy similar areas, and you don't want them to be too standalone. No. The last thing I just want to say is that your approach in here on slide 5, I think it is, says citizens jury on pricing philosophy, council presented with pricing results for discussion in the month following. Does that mean presented with the results of the citizens jury?
Yeah, so what, sorry, that's pretty clumsy wording on my part, but what the intention is to come back to council in March with a full report that says, here's the results of the citizens pricing jury, here's the results of the community feedback as a whole around price, here's the results with the IVR phone survey, which dealt a fair bit with price. And so now, moving forward, what do we want to embed within the playbook? What is council comfortable moving forward with? After they've had the opportunity to have lots of input from the community that can shape those recommendations or those approvals that you make at that point in time. So.
That's good to hear, because my only concern is I think it's a very innovative, and I'm glad you're exploring and using the citizens jury. I think it's a really innovative tool and a neat tool, but I'd be nervous if it became the dominant or standalone tool. It sounds like there's 2 or 3 other feedback that will make the pricing results don't just mean the citizens jury, it means 3 or 4 different types of engagement we've had.
Yeah.
And because I think it works as part of a suite, but I don't think it works as a standalone.
Exactly. And just on that note, with respect to the whole engagement process, that's exactly why we've gone through such an extensive engagement process all the way around the board, is that we didn't want anyone to suggest that it was skewed because we only heard from the same people that you always hear from, or any of those kinds of things. We wanted to ensure that we've captured as many different ways and as many different people as possible to engage. So,
Mr. McDougall.
Just to add to that, one of the things that will make sure that occurs as part of the citizen jury exercise and introduction is the fact that ultimately the citizens jury understands that council's decision-making with respect to the playbook will be influenced by a number of different factors, them being one of, and not the least of which will be all of council's strategic priorities and all of the things that council would grapple with in terms of moving the community forward. So it's made clear in a good way through an introduction into the citizen jury process that it will be an influencer, but it's not the sole influencer of where council moves with the decisions around the playbook process.
Thank you. Well, I'm impressed, but I'm not surprised, and I think it speaks to the creativity, the professionalism, and the leadership within the organization. So I compliment you on a very fulsome and comprehensive report. There are some areas that I'd like to get a little better understanding, and that is in terms of utilization of our existing facilities, the trends in the utilization, and our capacity utilization, because I think that will in part inform what our priorities should be as we go forward. But I'm assuming that that's going to be part of some of the information that you'll provide to the jury.
It will be, and actually, the facility peer review, we provided them with registration numbers. We provided them with all the minor sport organizations, what their enrollment numbers were, what their capacities are, and the rentals that they do. So they've been provided with all of that information, and so their recommendations don't just neutrally look at 100,000 people and say, okay, as a community of 100,000 people, you have this. They analyzed capacity within that, and that will be shared, as per Councillor Pazan's question earlier, that will be shared with the systems jury.
And there are other areas that, when I look back on page 15, where there's basic preschool leisure opportunities, some of that is provided inside the library's master plan as well. And so there will be some areas that there will be some crossover. Is the library engaged, or will there be some discussion with the library on this process, or have they been engaged as we've gone through the process?
The library was, when we identified community stakeholder interviews, the library is one of those interviews. And we will certainly coordinate and make sure they're aware of any results that we have, but are they at the table every time we do something? No, they're not.
Okay, but at least there is some level of engagement. Okay. The other thing in terms of timing, I know that we wanted to have a look at this as it might shape the budget, but more importantly, I think we need to take a look at having this information in front of us when we're shaping our strategic priorities. And so where and when will we be seeing the outcomes in relation to our initial strategic priority discussions?
I will answer the first part of that question, which is that you'll see the outcomes of this, the pricing component of it, you'll see the outcomes in early March. The overall recreation playbook, the intention is April to bring it forward to you. In terms of how that relates to the rest of the strategic priorities as a whole, I'll
turn that over to Mr. Sheldon.
Defer to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to make a point on that, and insofar as the 2015 budget is concerned as well. I think that whatever comes out of the playbook exercise, there will be the need for some transition recommendations coming from staff, because there may be impacts in terms of capital and operating costs. And I think the same thing applies with the strategic direction exercise, that you can't really accomplish everything in the first year. We do have the 4-year term to spread over transition in terms of the strategic objectives of council, and also the results that would come out of this process, and in particular the pricing and the impact that it may have on the budget. In terms of the strategic direction, one of the things that the director said, and we've talked about this before, sometimes the strategic direction of council can shape documents such as this. For example, there was a community in the past that set the strategic direction that they wanted to ensure that every child could swim by the age of whatever the number was. So that was a strategic objective, and it shaped what they did in terms of their model and their pricing. So I think we'll have to give some further thought to how those two documents and approaches merge together. And I just wanted to say one other thing, Mr. Mayor, just while I have the floor. I wanted to commend staff as well. It's a very innovative approach, and a lot of energy in the room, and a lot of energy in the department and the commission. And I thought that perhaps as you get to the end of the session, each staff member could introduce himself and what they do for the organization.
Great. Well, let's start that now. Go ahead.
Maybe I'll just do this since I'm on the microphone. But in the back row, we have Rick Curry, who's our theater coordinator. Next row, Jen McIntyre, who's our publication sponsorship marketing coordinator. Pat McIntosh is next to Jen, who's our inclusion programmer. And Kathleen Willens, who's our seniors programmer. And Kelly Gerard, who is our admin coordinator supporting seniors and inclusion and gyms and leagues and fitness and whatever else we seem to throw at her. It all seems to land on Kelly. And then we have Megan Graham, who's our newest programmer, and she's our camps programmer. And then we have Nadine Steenhook, who's an admin coordinator as well, working at supporting our youth center. And lately she's been supporting seniors as well, and she also supports camps. and Dave Sheridan, who's our acting supervisor of programs. In the next row, we have Beth Sinyard, who's our museum coordinator, and then Janice Luttrell, who's our arts and culture programmer. And Janice will be the operator, the programmer behind Old Town Hall when it opens. Then we have Christy Carlin, who's our, I think it's Christy, yeah, I couldn't see her over Rob's head. Christy, who's our manager of recreation services, and Tracy Pattison, who's our programmer of gyms, leagues, sports, and fitness. And then the next row down, we have Rhonda Pogue, who's our special events programmer, one of our special events programmer. We have two. Darlene Horner, who's our aquatics programmer, and Sarah Ernst, who's the other aquatics programmer, and Jacqueline Lotto, who is our programmer of community booked events, and so she works with the community groups that are running events and ensures that, so not the town run events. Rob Wilson, who's who's our supervisor of bookings and aquatics. And then we have Rob Ruskinen, who is Robbie, who's our admin coordinator in our marketing and sponsorship area. Stephanie Dairu, who's our supervisor of marketing and sponsorship. And Brianna Visser, who's an intern in our marketing and sponsorship area. And I'm not going to introduce those people over there.
Oh. Good. Well, you've done a great job, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. There being no other questions and no other items on the agenda.
Actually, though, I do have, I wanted to close off with one more video for you, just to, if you don't mind.
No, please do.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Sometimes in our lives we all have pain, we all have sorrow.
Shape the way you play.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Kerwin?
As it was the seniors' meeting place, I'd just like to say on Mondays and Thursdays, there's a fantastic lunch. As councillors, you're most welcome to come down there and meet the seniors. We're building our strength back up to 1,200, and thank you for honoring me and being your appointee to the seniors' meeting place, and I look forward to working with all the staff. But they have a great lunch on Mondays and Thursdays, and it has a reasonable price.
The last thing I wanted to do is extend an invitation. We have a program that is starting called Ahead of the Game, which features a Toronto Argonaut who is mentoring. The name of the Argonaut is Jonathan Hood, right? Sorry, I was drawing a blank. Jonathan Hood, who's from the Toronto Argonauts, who will serve as a mentor to teenagers in this area. That program is actually, there's an official media release that's starting in about 15 to 20 minutes at the Youth Center. So if anyone wants to come and be a part of that, you're certainly welcome. We would like to extend that invitation to you to do that.
Thank you. Okay, motion then to adjourn. Councillor Bazans, Councillor Day. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. This has been really helpful. 2 o'clock is site plan. Oh, did we bring lunch yet? Okay, good. Good.